Et salutare Tunda nobis. Deus adveniat, et cum spiritu tuo.
Exaudimus Domine Sancte Pater omnipotens eterne Deus, et mitere fidelis sanctum atrum tuum de celis, qui custodiat, foleat, protegat, visiterat, per defendat omnes habitantes in hoc habitaculum, per Christum Dominum nostrum.
Amen. Circumde derunt me, gemitus mortis, dolores inferi, circumde derunt me, et in tribulatione mea invocavi Dominum, et exaudivit templo sancto suo vocem meam. Diligam te, Domine, fortitudo mea. Dominus verum meum, et refugium meum, et liberator meus. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio, et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. cum spiritu tuo.
Oremus. Vinces populi tui quesos Domine clementer exaudi, ut quius de pro peccatis nostris affligimum, pro qui nomini gloria misericordia liberemur, per Dominum nostrum Iesu Christum Filium tuum, et regnat in unitate Spiritus Sancti Deus, per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Amen.
Lectio Epistolae Beati Pauli Apostoli a Corinthios. Fratres nescitis quodiqui in stadio forunt, omnes quidem furunt, servus accipit bravium, sicurite ut comprehendicatis, omnis autem qui in agone contendit, ab omnibus se abstinet, et iniquidem ut corruptibilem coronam accipiam, nos autem incorrupta. Ego igitur sicuro non quasi incertum, sic pugno non quasi aerem, verberans, sed castino corpus meum ad in servitutem redico, ne forte cum agis predicaverim, ipsere propos efficiar. Non oem vos ignorare, fratres, quoniam patres nostris omnes sub node fuerunt, et omnes mare transierunt, et omnes in Moises baptizatis sunt in nube et in mari, et omnes eam nescam spiritualem mancaverunt, et omnes eundem vocum spiritualem viverunt, vivevant autem quendios tetra temerat Christos, sed non in pluribus eorum per in pacitum est Deo.
Adiutor in opportunitatibus, in tribulatione, sperent in te, qui noverunt te, quoniam non dere liquis, quae avant est te Domine, quoniam non in finem oblivio veret operis, scientiam operum non peneguit in eternum, et surgi Domine, non prevaleat homo, de profundis clamavi, a te Domine, Domine exaudi vocem mea. Fiant ares tue intendentes in oratio
Deus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Sequentiae Sancti Evangelii secundum Mattheum.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
In illo tempore dixit Iesus discipulis suis parabola, simile est regnum celorum homini patri familias. Primum mane conducere operarios in viniam suam. Conventione autem facta cum operaris extenario diurno, nisi Deus in viniam suam. Et regressus circa horam tertiam divitario stantes in foro ociosus, et dixit illis, ite vos in viniam meam et quod justum fueritavo vobis. Ili autem abierut, iterum autem exit circa sextam et nonam horam, et fecit similite. Circa undecimam vero exit, et invenit alios stantes, et dicit illis, quid statis tota die ociosi. Dicunt ei, qui animos conduxit. Dicit illi, te vos in viniam meam. Cum sero autem factum esset, dicit Dominus vinia procuriatorit suo, voca operarios et rede illis mercedem. Incipienza novissimis usque ad primus. Cum venissent ergo qui circa undecimam horam venerant, acceperunt signos denarios. Venientes autem et primi aviunt quod plus essent acceptori, acceperunt autem in ipsi signos denarios. Et accepientes murabant adversus patrem familias dicentes, in novissime una hora fecerunt, et pares illos nobis fecisti, portavimus pondus et piscus. Et ille respondes uniorum dixit, amice non facio tibi injuriam, non extenario convenisti mecum. Tone quantum est et fave, voloatem et cum in novissimo dare sicut et tibi. Aut non micet mi quod volo facere, anoculus plus nequam est quia ego bonus sum. Sic erunt novissimi primi et primi novissimui. Multi enim sunt vocati sunt, paci vero electi.
A reading from Paul's letter to the Corinthians. Brethren, Know you not that they that run in the race all run indeed, but one receiveth the prize? So run that you may obtain. And every one that striveth for the mastery refraineth himself from all things, and that they indeed may receive a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible one. I therefore so run, not as an uncertainty. I so fight, not as one beating the air, but I chastise my body, and bring it into subjection, lest perhaps when I have preached to others, I myself should become a castaway. For I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all in Moses were baptized, in the cloud and in the sea, and all did eat the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. And they drank of the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. But with most of them, God was not well pleased. Please stand for the gospel. From the Gospel of Matthew. At that time, Jesus spoke to his disciples this parable. The kingdom of heaven is like to a householder who went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. And having agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing in the marketplace idle. And he said to them, Go you also into my vineyard, and I will give you what shall be just. And they went their way. And again, he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did in the like manner. But about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing. And he said to them, Why stand you here all day idle? They said to him, Because no man has hired us. He said to them, Go you also into my vineyard. Come, the Lord of the vineyard said to his steward, Call the laborers and pay them their hire, beginning from the last even to the first. When therefore they were come, they gave about the 11th hour. They received every man a penny. But when the first also came, they thought they should receive more. They also received every man a penny. And receiving it, they murmured against the master of the house, saying, These last have worked but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal to us, that have borne the burden of the day and the heats. But answering, he said to one of them, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Did thou not agree to do with me for a penny? Take what is thine and go thy way. I will also give to this last even as to thee. Or is it not lawful for me to do what I will? Is thy eye evil because I am good? So shall the last be first, and the first be last. For many are called, but few are chosen. The gospel of, please be seated. Just a couple brief announcements before beginning the homily today. Note that this week we have 2 special feast days. And so on Tuesday is February 2nd. It's presentation of our Lord, Candle Mass, or Fiesta de la Candelaria. We will have an additional Mass at 6 a.m. here. It will be a candlelit Mass here at St. Pat's, 6 a.m. on Tuesday, February 2nd. There will also be a blessing of candles at that Mass and also at the 5:30 Mass. The 5:30 Mass will be bilingual to accommodate the rest of our community. Candles, I've had the question, do they have to be beeswax? It is encouraged that they are, but any natural wax candles can be blessed. Also, on February 3rd is the Feast of St. Blaise, and so after having blessed those candles, we will then use candles to bless throats. So there'll be a blessing of the 5:30 Mass as well, and that Mass will be bilingual to accommodate our entire community. Note that next week there'll be bins. You'll see it the first weekend of the month. There's bins out for collection for Echo, our parish collection for Echo. So next week is the time when we do that collection, and so there'll be bins out. You're free to bring foodstuffs or money to donate to Echo on that weekend. Also note that from February 8th to the 12th, there will not be daily Mass here. So there's not daily Mass from February 8th to the 12th. I will be on vacation, and we're going to do some repairs here in the church, and so we're going to have some scaffolding up to fix the ceiling section here, and we won't have daily Mass in here during that time. I apologize for those that can only make the 5:30 time. And then also after Mass, I believe he'll be here, but Tim Wallace, the son of Marie Wallace, who is our Director of Religious Education, he's on track to get his Eagle Scout, and his Eagle project is going to be kind of a little facelift of the entryway of our parish center. So he's going to do a paint job, clean up some of the doors and the plates around the light switches and the plugs and things like that, and perhaps if we can find them, put in some gates for us there as well. So he'll be in the back there asking for your support for that as well. Oh, and you'll notice, I think they fit, but I ordered new candles, and they're a little bit taller than I originally thought, but I think they look quite nice, actually. You'll notice today here at our Mass is that we changed the colors to purple. And for those of us that have plenty of experience with the Extraordinary Form Mass, we are aware of this switch, but this is what we call Septuagesima Sunday. And in the Extraordinary Form, we begin the preparation for Lent, which is, of course, a preparation for Easter. But we begin to enter into a period of a spirit of a little bit more penitential, as we hear in the readings, again, about the runner who chastises themselves in order to run the race. And we begin to prepare ourselves for the denial and for the self-denial and the penance of the season of Lent. And some of the comments here by Paul, he is here speaking about trying to give us an example. He's trying to give us an example, lest perhaps when I have preached to others, I myself should become a castaway. And so Paul is giving us an example here of sort of his sanctity. And there's a topic that I want to enter into that is very dear to the heart of St. Paul and that he exhorts many to. And that is the topic of celibacy. And sometimes we take celibacy kind of out of its context, or we just look at it as a precept or as a rule. And I want to actually take the concept of celibacy that St. Paul encourages. He encourages chastising of the body, refraining from all things in order to win this incorruptible crown, and place this celibacy within the context of that story of salvation that we've been talking about, right? So we've got the grandeur of creation, the tragedy of sin, the drama of redemption, and the response of faith. How does celibacy interact with that story of salvation? How does it play a role in all of that? You know, I think many people in the world look at celibacy sort of strangely, right? And perhaps we don't, but many people look at celibacy quite strangely and encourage, maybe if we got rid of it, we'd have more priests. Or maybe it's the root of a lot of the problems that we have in the church. Or it's just so that Father can spend more time. We think it's maybe more practical. We think it's just about being able to spend more time taking care of the parish. And we've often heard the statement that celibacy was only made a rule or a precept in the 11th century. It was optional until then, and it was only in the 11th century that it was required. But what we learn from the example of St. Paul that he sets for us, from the example of Jesus Christ himself, we learn that celibacy is something that was in place for Christians from the very beginning of the Christian faith. And again, celibacy is not entering into marriage and pledging to remain oneself free from sexual relations and to remain a virgin and unmarried. And the way that this interacts with the story of faith is this. With regards to the grandeur of creation, because celibacy is a sacrifice, it actually affirms the grandeur of creation. And because it's a call, it recognizes the tragedy of sin. And because it's a sign, it's a response to God's redemption. So it's a sacrifice, it's a call, and it is a sign. This first question is, how does celibacy interact with the grandeur of creation? Because at first we see celibacy and we think, oh, well, celibacy is like a rejection of marriage, right? I mean, it's kind of saying like, this is better, right? Or that's bad. And it's actually the exact opposite. Because we understand that celibacy itself is a sacrifice. And you can't sacrifice something that is bad. You only sacrifice something that is good. And so really in these conception of celibacy as being a sacrifice, it actually affirms the goodness of original creation. It affirms the fact that in the beginning, humankind was made male and female. That in the beginning, God said it was not good for man to be alone. That in the beginning, God said, be fruitful and multiply. It affirms all those things as good. And then it sacrifices them. I think we know that those in particular who are called to celibacy in the priesthood are not meant to do so just because they don't want to get married. I think maybe we recall some confirmations with Bishop Morlino, where he'd go down and he'd call forward some boys and he'd their heads. Well, I had actually experienced that interaction myself when I first entered seminary. Sat down at dinner, Italian, of course, and he asked me to become a seminarian for him. And I paused, and I said, yes. And then he said, why the long pause? And I said, well, to be honest, Your Excellency, I'm just afraid that I like women too much. Oh, that's not a problem. That's a prerequisite. We've heard that line from the confirmations, and maybe you've heard me tell that story before. But I think it emphasizes this point that for Bishop Morlino, he really expressed and helped us to understand the fact that it was meant to be something that was sacrificed. It wasn't just supposed to be marriage isn't for me, I guess I'll be a priest. Both were meant to be affirmed. And so when deciding between, when choosing or discerning the vocation to the priesthood or celibacy, is not a matter of, do I not like marriage? No. And that's where we come into this second one. It's, have I been called? And so we recognize that celibacy is a special call. And in this way, it affirms the tragedy of sin. It affirms that, we're not perfect. It affirms that we're fallen. And so part of embracing this gift of celibacy is that it's got to be a special grace that we receive. One that not only do I want to, but can I? And so that's why in seminary, we spend 6 to 8 years trying to decide if we're going to be a priest. And full profession takes 8 to 12 years for many religious orders. Right? Part of that is simply to say, do you want this life? And can you live it? And so in this way, it recognizes that we live in this world of sin, of difficulty. And so then we come to the sign that celibacy is for all of us and how it interacts with redemption, how it's a response of faith. And first of all, I'd like to return back to the origins of it and how it's a response to the life that Jesus Christ calls us to live. Because we recognize that Jesus Christ himself was celibate. We recognize that Paul himself was celibate. And that all the apostles, maybe they were married at one time, but eventually lived lives as celibates, because when Jesus says, anyone who has given up father or mother or wife or children or job, land for my sake, they will receive 100-fold in this world and in the next. And Peter comes forward. We know that he's living celibately because he says, Lord, we have left everything in order to follow you. What is there for us? And he says, to you will be given the 12 thrones in heaven, from which you will judge the 12 tribes of Israel. You will be my apostles, Jesus says. You will be there with me reigning in heaven because of this sacrifice. And so in this, we see that in the very early church, this was almost the norm for those early disciples. And then again, we know early Christian communities at that time were formed to live in this way. Early monasticism, all the way up until today. So it's not just a phenomenon that happens in the Middle Ages, but a practice that we see throughout the history of the church. In fact, it was the custom, it was generally seen that every priest and bishop was celibate from the beginning. Maybe they had a wife, but eventually they would allow someone to take care of their household while they took care of the church. So in this, we see that this was a response of many of the early Christians to that call to follow Christ. It was just their response to his redemption that he brought for us. And so we get here to the end. We see how celibacy interacts with the story of salvation as a sacrifice, as a call, and as a sign, as a response to Christ's call to follow him. But then we might ask, is celibacy only something that benefits those who make that choice? Well, first of all, I want to expand our concept of celibacy. Sometimes we think that celibates are only those who have made a promise or a vow of celibacy. But anyone who's not yet married, is called to celibacy. Anyone who's been separated from their spouse is called to celibacy. Anyone who lost a spouse and has not remarried is called to celibacy. And at times we see this maybe as a burden. We think, I just gotta kind of fix my situation. But if we recognize that really the Lord might be calling me in that moment to be, as Paul says, undivided, anxious about things of the Lord, then we can see our situation as being a blessing rather than a burden. But even then, those who do make vows and promises of celibacy do provide something else for the rest of the community. We look into the catechism, and what does this promise and vow mean? Well, it's meant to remind us of something. It's meant to remind us of the drama of that redemption. It's meant to remind us that even though we look out and we see the world is covered with sin and death, it's meant to remind us that that the kingdom of God is at hand. That there's something beyond this world. Who of us does not think about God or something beyond this world when we see a priest walking down the street in their collar or a nun in her habit? You have to conceive or think that at least of this thing that is beyond. And others do too. I don't think there's anyone in the Western world really who would see this and not think that it has something spiritual in mind. And some people reject that, right? I've been spit on, I've been yelled at, I've been cursed at. And other people affirm it. And it actually becomes an inspiration to others when they see that example, that reminder that there is more to this world than just the sin that we see in it. And so in this way, celibacy is meant to be a benefit for all of us, that those themselves to have an undivided heart might inspire all of us to, again, be above all anxious about the things of the Lord and how we might please him.
Adrem omnipotentem, factorem celi et terrae, visibilium omnium, et invisibilium, et in unum Dominum Iesum Christum, Filium Dei unigenitum, et ex Patre natum, ante omnia saecula, Deum de Deo, lumen de lumine, Deum verum, de Deo verum, genitum non factum, consubstantialem Patri, per quem omnia facta sunt, qui propter nos homines, et propter nostrum salutem, descendit de celis, et incarnatus est, de Spiritus Sancto, ex Maria Virgine, et homo factus est, crucifixus et siam pro nobis, sub Pontio Pilato, passus et sepultus est, et resurrexit tertia die, secundum scripturas, et ascendit in caelum, sedere ad dexteram Patris, et iterum venturus est cum gloria, judicare vivos et mortuos, cuius regi non erit finis, et in Spiritum Sanctum Dominum, et vivificantem, qui ex Patre Filioque procedit, qui cum Patre et Filio simul adorator, et cum glorificator, qui locutus est per prophetas, et unam sanctam catholicam, et apostolicam ecclesiam, confideorum baptisma, in remissionem peccatorum, et expecto resurrectionem mortuorum, et vitam venturi seculi. Et cum spiritu tuo. Bonum est confit Domino, et salere nomini tuo altissime. O Sanctissima, Obissima, Dulcis Virgo Maria, Mater amata, intemerata, ora pro nobis. et cum spiritu tuo. Habemus ad Dominum.
Gratias agamus Domino Deo nostro.
Dignum et justum est.
Gratias magere, Domine sancte Deus, qui congenito Filio tuo et Spiritus Sancto los est Deus, unus est Dominus, non in unio singularitate persone, sed in unius Trinitate substantiae, quod in tua gloria relante te credimus, quod de Filio tuo, quod de Spiritus Sancto, sine differentia creationis sentimus, quod in conversione vere semper teneque Deitatis, et in personis proprietas, et in essentia unitas, et in majestate adoretur equalitas, quam narrat angeli atque arcangeli, cherubim quoque ad seraphim, qui non cessat clamare quotidiane una voce dicentes.
Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus Dominus, Deus Sabaoth, Plenis sunt caeli et terra, gloria tua. Hosanna in excelsis.
nobis hoc et peccatoribus.
Per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Amen.
Oremus, receptis salutaribus moniti, et viviret Septuagesima formati, ademus dicere, Pater noster qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentationem,
Sed libera nos a malo.
per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Amen.
Pax Domini sit semper vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo. Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccata mundi, miserere nobis. Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccata mundi, miserere nobis. Agnus Dei, qui tollis peccata mundi, dona nobis pacem.
Ecce Agnus Dei, ecce qui colit peccatus meus.
Illumina faciem tuam, super servum tuum, et salvum me fac in tua misericordia. Domine, non confundas
cum spiritu tuo.
Oremus. Fideles tui Deus per tua dona ferventur, Eniade me percipiendo requiem nos in principiam, per Domum nostrum Iesu Christum Filium tuum, qui tecum vivit et regnat in unitate Spiritus Sancti Deus, per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Amen.
Dominus vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo.
benedicamus Dominum,
Deo gratias.
Benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater, Filius, et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen. Dominus vobiscum, initium sancti evangelis cum Ioannem. In principio erat verbum, et verbum erat Deum, et Deus erat verbum. Hoc erat in principio apud Deum, omnia per ipsum facto est, sin ipsum factum est nihil cum factum est. Et ipso vita erat, et vita erat lux hominum, et lux in tenebris luce. Et tenebrae eam non comprehendeam. Cui domum Iisus ad Deo, cui nomen erat Ioannis. Ec venit testimonium per vivere et illuminei, omnes credere per illi. Non erat ille lux, sem testimonium per vivere et illuminei. Erat lux vera quae illuminat omnem hominum venientum in mundo. Il mundo erat et mundus ipsum factus est, et mundus eum non coniorum. In propria venit et sui eum non recepere. Or quod autem receperum Deum eius potestatem filios Dei, fieri his qui credit in nomine eius. Qui non ex sanguinibus, neque ex voluntate carnis, neque ex voluntate virilis, sed ex Deum natus. Et verbum caro factum est, habitavit in nobis genimus gloriam eius, quasi Dei, et patrem gratiae et veritatis. Deo gratias. I apologize for the interruption. I just wanted to remind those that we have no Latin Mass next week. No Latin Mass next week.